Hello and welcome to my stream. Hello, Shalom. There is an interesting conundrum because I don't really know where I left off. Um, so I need to try to find Parable of the Vineyard and
Shalom and welcome, brothers and sisters. Welcome to.
uh, why do you use the Sefer? It's so terrible. Anyways,
For many terms. The angel of Yahweh, the messenger of Yahweh, which we'll see in Malachi in a bit.
oh, I can't wait.
The word of Yahweh.
Oh, we already went over that. When it uses that phrase, it's literally a saying, a word coming to them. It's not about a man.
Prince of Peace, all of it. So,
Prince of Peace. Oh, yes, Isaiah 9:6. Except he says, do not think I come to bring peace. I come to divide. Oh, that is good. That is so good. It's time to live stream meme. Isaiah 9:6. He's the Prince of Peace. He says he did not come to bring peace, but the sword. He came to bring peace. Now, you shut up. Oh, I love it. I don't know what's going on. Hopefully, we didn't lose the stream. My browser just decided to crash on me. Sorry if that interrupted the stream when I saved the file. If ever anyone says a Mac is great, yeah, no, just get a PC and put Linux on it. This is so terrible. I've never had this many problems with any of the Linux distros I've used over the last 20 years. Blue Letter Bible, where are you? Isaiah 9:6. For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us. The government will rest on his shoulder, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. Now, it's interesting. You have these four words here, right? His name will be called, which is Shema Kara, which is the same words we see in the previous chapter in verse 3. Gave birth to his son, then Yahweh said to me, Shema Kara. his name will be called. But you see what the translators did here. They don't directly translate this name, Maharshal Bashbaz. Now, why is it, even going back to the corrupt Greek, instead of transliterating a name, they translate it? So when you come across this in your pretext of idolatry, what are you going to see? You're going to see your idol. But this is not correct. Now, there are two interpretations of this. Um, One would transliterate all of that after Karashima as the name, which is what the JPS Tanakh does. And it's verse 5 in the JPS: For a child is born unto us, a son is given unto us, and the government is upon his shoulder, and his name is called Pele Joes El Gibur Abe Ad Sar Solom. It's a name. It's not supposed to be translated. And this is the problem with calling him the Prince of Peace. It's not how a name works. And all of this name about Hezekiah is to glorify Yahweh, because mighty God. He was never called. He was never called the everlasting Father. In fact, he was never called the Prince of Peace. This is all false presuppositions from Christians. He was never called any of these things. Not once. But if you look at what Hezekiah means, and it's Hezekiah, Yah. So let's look at the name in the interlinear. Hezekiah is Yahweh is my strength, or the mighty God. It doesn't mean Hezekiah is the mighty God or the everlasting Father. You see, this is the problem, is that you don't understand Hebraic thinking. Let me really prove that to you. Like, look at some other names. Jeremiah, which is Yeremiahu, right? Which is Jeremiah Yahu, whom Jehovah has appointed or made Mashiach. And remember, that's what we were talking about, Isaiah 53, 7 to 8. The lamb and being cut off. Let's look at another one. How about Yeshayahu, Isaiah? Jehovah has saved, which is similar to, the first name that's Joshua, right? Joshua chapter 1, it says, Jehovah Amar El Yehoshua. Yehoshua is what? Jehovah is salvation. Does this mean Yehoshua, the son of Nun, is himself Jehovah? No. And this is why, you don't understand Hebraic thinking in the time frame that these books are written, and you apply a first century idolatrous frame over the text. This isn't saying that Yehoshua was Jehovah in the flesh, which is basically what you're saying about the New Testament.
Here we see Messiah as a living being called the Word of Yahweh. So Isaiah 2, verse 1, the word that Isaiah
We already saw this. Dealt with that 3 episodes ago. All right, here we go. So we read that, and I showed how it's about the nation and about Ezekiel.
Israel is designated as Yahweh's servant.
Correct, it is true. So why would you make it about a single man who clearly didn't fulfill this prophecy when you really dig in?
But it's not just limited to Israel. Abraham is recognized as Israel. John the
Correct,
Baptist.
it's not just limited to Israel. So using your same logic, why are you trying to limit Isaiah 53 to be about the idol? This is the logic you're using. It's not about Israel because the servant is not just Israel, it's also individuals. Yes, because these individuals make up what? Israel.
Moses is his servant. David's his servant. And read this context. Some people are trying to insert false doctrine into this, saying that Israel saves itself.
No, that's not what I'm saying because that's not what the text says in Hebrew. It doesn't say the suffering servant saves himself. I mean, this is such a ridiculous interpretation. Let's take a look at Ezekiel again because, clearly some people really need to read this and understand it. Does the fact that Ezekiel bore their iniquity mean that Ezekiel saved them? No. The whole purpose is to be an example of what they're doing. It's the same thing with Hosea, right? Hosea, as an example, he marries a harlot. Go take yourself a wife of harlotry and have children of harlotry, for the land commits flagrant harlotry, forsaking Yahweh. It's the same sort of example. Ezekiel bearing the iniquity, fulfilling Isaiah 53, doesn't mean he saved Israel of their sins that led them into exile. This is such an it's just so disturbing that people come to these erroneous conclusions.
Ever anywhere in the Torah where Israel
Always needed a judge, and then they wanted a king, and then it's like
This is interesting. Listen to this.
right. They always needed a judge, and then they wanted a king, and then it's like
Yes, I mean, you say this and it just like goes over your head what you're saying. Like, you wanted a king. And look at John 6. And so much of the New Testament is written in a way that it's supposed to raise red flags in your spirit, in your mind, in your. So you say, this is something wrong here. So Yesu, knowing that they were going to come and take him by force and make him king, withdrew again to the mountain by himself alone. Now, if he's supposed to be the Mashiach, the king, why wouldn't he want to be anointed as king? Regardless of what happens after that, wouldn't that prove definitively the point you're trying to make? Now, I know you're spiritualizing it, but as I went through the whole series, none of the promises are spiritual. But the bigger issue is, remember, the New Testament says he is a man, not God. And this is the whole thing you miss because you're stuck in your Roman pretext. But now are you seeking to kill me, a man? Would God, Yahweh, call himself a man? Or Acts 2:22, this is the words of Peter. Men of Israel, listen to these words. Yesu the Nazarene, a man. Or Paul, Colossians 1:15, who is the image of the invisible God. Does Paul call him Elohim? No. And you see, this is like compounding issues. Your theological history of Rome, the fact that these writings were not written by the one cult continuously. They weren't. John's writings were not written by the same people who followed the writings of Matthew. In fact, I firmly believe John's writings were written in the 2nd century by Gnostics. The image of the invisible God. He's not God. And again from Paul, right? Romans 8:3. For what the law could not do, weak as it was through the flesh, and this is ridiculous. The Torah is not weak, it's perfect. It saves the soul. Elohim did, sending his own son in the likeness of sinful flesh. And remember, his own son, right? Exodus 4:22. What does that say about that? Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says Yahweh, Israel is my son. Paul, the Pharisee of Pharisees, is changing the son. And his writings came first. This is why Matthew did it in 2:15. Let's just look at that. Matthew 2:15, right? And they remained until the death of Herod in order that what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet would be fulfilled, saying, out of Egypt I called my son. And, one of the first things you should do is if you love Yah, you should know what prophet said this and the context. So you understand what is else to come. So go to Hosea 11. When Israel was a youth, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. Israel as the son again. Israel, not the first century Yeshua. Israel is the son. Israel is the servant. You see, the New Testament writers, and Paul started this, were basically stealing texts out of context to form their pretext. And many of them that they steal are about the Babylonian exile, and they just try to appropriate that to be about the first century. They believed the first century was the end of all things. And this is throughout the New Testament. It's like, look at the phrase the last hour, right? 1 John 2:18, children, it is the last hour. Is the last hour 2,000 years? Matthew 20:12 is not the same. So let's look at that and look at cross references, because this is something that's throughout the New Testament. 2 Timothy 3, but now this, that in the last days, difficult times will come. The last days, and this is the same reason, Joseph Smith called his cult the Church of what? Latter-day Saints, the last day saints. Joseph Smith prophesied the second coming would come in Missouri in his lifetime. Didn't happen. And this is the same sort of prophecies that exist in the New Testament. In these last days, Hebrews 1:2, 1 Peter 1:5, who are protected by the power of God through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. 1 Peter 1:20, he was foreknown before the foundation of the world, but appeared in these last times for the sake of you. 2 Peter 3:3, knowing this, that first of all, that in the last days, did you think he really meant 2,000 years? I know in this chapter, the second century pseudepigrapha says, a day to the Lord is like 1,000 years. He wasn't literally saying that to make it mean that the last days were going to be 1,000 years long or more. I'm sorry, but that's not a correct interpretation. Jude 1:18, that they were saying to you that in the last time there will be mockers. And remember, he's writing to these people. None of these writers in the first and second century expected their writings to become collected in a canon. They expected the return of the idol to be imminent. Look at another one from Paul, Romans 13:11. In doing this, knowing the time, that it is already the hour for you to do, awaken from sleep. Now the salvation is nearer to us than when we believed. It's clear as day what he's saying here. It is going to happen before you die. 1 Thessalonians 4. For this we say by you the word of the Lord, that we who are alive, and do you think he meant people 2,000 years later? I mean, do you really think that's what he meant? That people reading this 2,000 years later would interpret this passage to be about a rapture? No, he was talking about an imminent return. And remain until the coming of the Lord will not precede those who have fallen asleep. Then we who are alive and remain. See this? I mean, you just read this and assume it's about you. But he was writing to people 2,000 years ago that they will be alive when he returns.
They needed something, and there wasn't a mediator. I mean, there was Moshe, but
They needed something. This is such the perverse mind making assumptions, right? Like go back to 1 Samuel 8, and Christians read this and they don't understand what's being said. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah, and they said, "Behold, you have grown old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king for us to judge us like the nations." See, they wanted to be like what? Like the nations. Now go back to Torah, Deuteronomy 12:31. Let's start actually a few verses up. When Yahweh your Elohim cuts off before you the nations which you are going in to dispossess, and you dispossess them and inhabit their land, beware lest you be ensnared to follow them, including making a man a king, which is what we see in John 6, after they are destroyed before you, unless you inquire after their Elohim, saying, "How do these nations serve their gods, that I might do likewise?" You shall not do thus toward Yahweh your Elohim. Now you'll say, well, what about Deuteronomy 17, right? Because Deuteronomy 17 gives us a commandment of the king. Starting in verse 14, when you enter the land which Yahweh your Elohim gives you, and you possess it and live in it, you will say, "I will set a king over me like all the nations who are around me." See, because this is in here, you presume it's a commandment to choose a king, but it's not. He's saying you're going to do this, so here is the guidelines for that man. You shall surely set a king over you, whom Yahweh your Elohim chooses, one whom among your brothers you shall set as a king over yourselves. You may not put a foreigner over yourselves who is not your brother. Moreover, he shall not multiply horses for himself, nor shall he cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. And it's interesting, again, we see this warning for the king not to return to Egypt. And this is something, that's throughout the prophets as well. Even in Hosea 11, where, Matthew twisted the passage to be about the idol. Just a few verses later, it says, they will not return to Egypt, in the context that he's trying to use to make about the idol going to Egypt.
and after him, judges, kings, and that failed eventually, right? They needed something greater.
It's true. So picking back,
Oh, they needed something greater. Seek Yahweh while he may be found. What's greater than seeking Yahweh? Could they not seek Yahweh, even though the prophet Isaiah, in the context of chapter 53, says, "Seek Yahweh"? Can he be sought or not? It doesn't say that we have to go through the Son like John 14 says. It says, "Seek Yahweh."
back up where we were, verse 6. It says, all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and Yahweh has laid on him the iniquity of us all.
Yeah, so tell me how on a Roman cross he's got anything laid on him. See, you're spiritualizing it, even though Ezekiel clearly explains this verse. Now, as for you, get yourself an iron plate, set it up as an iron wall between you and the city, establish your face toward it so that it is under siege, and besiege it. This is a sign to the house of Israel. And now, as for you, lie down on your left side and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel on it. I mean, it tells you right there. Like, he has laid on him the iniquity of us all. It's the same language. And yet, a Christian or Messianic, they'll see this, they'll hear these words, and they'll say, Ezekiel didn't do that. It literally tells you he laid the iniquity on Ezekiel for Israel. And then what does it say next? You shall bear their iniquity. Let's go back to Isaiah 53, because this is exactly the same language. What's that at? Yeah. So surely our griefs he himself bore, right? Or carried. And this is what he's doing as an example of Israel. It doesn't mean, and this is your misreading of the text, interpreting it as this suffering servant saving Israel through his suffering. That's not the whole point of Isaiah 53. You shall bear their iniquity for the number of days that you lie on it. Isn't this interesting? You shall bear their iniquity. Does that mean that he is literally doing this? No, it's an example.
All of our sins are laid on him. So it's all
No, Adam, no. That's not what Isaiah 53 is talking about. Were all of their sins laid on Ezekiel? Why don't they go to Ezekiel as a shadow of the idol? Ezekiel bore their iniquity one day for every year of their sin. Why not say, look, that's a shadow. It's a type and shadow of the idol. Never will they go to Ezekiel.
also said that one can't take the sins of another. That's not true.
No, that is true. See, this is where you're missing the point again. Look at Deuteronomy 24:16, and then we'll go to Ezekiel again. Fathers shall not be put to death for the sons, nor shall the sons be put to death for their fathers. The fact that Ezekiel bore the iniquity of the people does not mean he took their sins away. See, again, your pretext is blinding you.
We saw that in the foreshadowing of all the animal sacrifices. When you sinned, the sin was laid upon the head of that animal, and the animal.
No. No, no, no. Oh. Oh, God. So, number one, the sin is not literally put on the animal. The sin, and this is for unintentional sin, and this is the big problem. And Christians don't even understand the difference in sins. Like, if I, this is something even I myself believed. If I go into an office and I accidentally take a thumbtack, they'll say that's the same as, stealing a man's wife. All sin is the same. Sin is sin. Like, no. Accidentally taking a thumbtack is not the same as adultery. It doesn't have the same punishment, and it doesn't have the same severity. It doesn't have the same effect on the person that it was committed. Sins are not all equal. And it's the same thing with the idea of intentional sin versus unintentional sin. The atoning sacrifice for the animal he's talking about is only for unintentional sin. And the fact that the animal is sacrificed doesn't mean that it's okay now to sacrifice a man for all sin. You see the jump, the logical fallacy here? It's okay to sacrifice an animal as a representation of your sin, to kill your sin so you no longer commit unintentional sin. It is not okay to kill a man that's innocent for your sin.
So once again, when people are like, "Show me Messiah in the Tanakh or the Old Testament," here he is, right here. It says, "Yahweh has laid on him the iniquity of us all."
Why don't you read Ezekiel 4? I mean, how many times do I have to have him out? It literally says, Yahweh has laid the iniquity of Israel on him. I mean, you want your type and shadow, there it is.
That would not work in the context of Israel. And I'm saying that on
Is Ezekiel part of Israel? And yet he laid on him the iniquity of us all. But remember what I said in the prior episode, that Jerusalem also represents the servant. Jerusalem had the iniquity of Israel laid upon it and was made a waste place. And this is the problem. Like, the Talmudist has corrupted your mind with this idea that it's about a future suffering man for the sins of Israel, when it was about the Babylonian exile.
Israel, has he laid on Israel all the sin? This doesn't make any sense. I'm not trying to
Neither does human sacrifice, but here you go in circles trying to defend it.
poke fun, but it just does not his mouth.
All right, so now we're to Isaiah 53:7. This is where we left off yesterday. So Jeremiah 11:19. Remember, he was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. And so we're going to go to another passage too. He was oppressed by the Pharisees repeatedly. And what did he do? But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you shut off the kingdom of Uranus from people, for you do not enter yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense you make long prayers, therefore you will receive greater condemnation. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel around on sea and land to make one proselyte. And I seriously doubt any Jew ever did this. This is Paul. Seriously, that's Paul. And when he becomes one, you make yourselves twice so much a son of hell as yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the sanctuary, that is nothing, but whoever swears by the gold of the sanctuary is obligated. You fools and blind men, over and over again. How are you saying he opened not his mouth? Like, he repeatedly gives these long exhortations to everyone, including Pilate. And as a sheep before his shearers is dumb, so he opens not his mouth.
Lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep crucifixion scene, Pilate was like, "Don't you know that I have the power to release you?" He was like, "Answer me!" Right?
Oh, and so now we're just going to make it about one event, the crucifixion scene when Pilate was there. And it's so funny. You believe these lies that Pilate was a peaceful man. I mean, now at the same time that there was some present who reporting to him about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mixed with their sacrifices, Pilate wouldn't care. Pilate would not care. He would just murder people just for the sake of murdering people. And so remember what it said. He was silent before his accusers. Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor questioned him, saying, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus said to him, "You yourself say it." He did not open his mouth? Really? And this is his claim. So now we're looking at the text of the New Testament. And what do we see? Every book has him opening his mouth. You yourself say it. And then let's look at John's. Jesus answered. He answered, meaning what? He opened his mouth. At the key scene that Adam is talking about, he opened his mouth.
He was just like, he was silent.
Right.
He
Jesus answered, "Are you saying this from yourself, or did others tell you about me?" And Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests delivered you to me. What did you do?" And Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would be fighting so that I would not be delivered over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." And then Pilate said to him, "So you are king?" Jesus answered, "You yourself said I am king. For this I have been born, and for this I have come into the world, to bear witness of the truth. Everyone who hears the truth hears my voice." Apparently not. Because did you hear what he just said?
asked someone, he was like, answer me. Right? And he was just like, he was silent.
He was just like silent, even though he just had this whole exhortation with Pilate during the most key scene that he's talking about. He was silent.
Right.
He answered some of the questions, but for many of them, he was silent. When he
Oh, there we go. He answered some of the questions, but many of them. Jesus. Always a loophole, isn't there? He did not open his mouth. So he did not open his mouth. He answered some of the questions.
could have defended himself.
Yes, he could have. Because, it's a sin to murder an innocent man, right, Adam? Torah. Cursed is he who takes a bribe to strike down innocent blood, and all the people shall say amen. It's a sin to strike down that innocent man for your sin, yet you still defend it. You still take that bribe.
All the attacks, all the persecution, all the false witnesses, all the lies. He could have been like, no, 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 no. And Pilate would have released him.
Yeah, he would have, like he did the other Galilean that he killed, who was likely also an innocent man, and then put his blood on the altar, defiling it. Pilate would have released him. Oh, oh my God! Like that's just so ludicrous. It makes me so angry that he would say something that's so historically inaccurate.
But he had to fulfill this.
But he had to fulfill this because it wasn't about the Babylonian exile, as is clearly shown if you read the context, if you read the other prophets, if you read the history. No, none of that was true. It was about human sacrifice.
Verse 8, he was taken from
Yes. Verse 8. Who was put in prison? But he was like a gentle lamb led to the slaughter, and I did not know they had devised thoughts against me, saying, "Let us make the tree with its fruit ruin. Let us cut him off from the land of the living, that his name be remembered no more." But you still believe it's about the idol man.
prison, which happened, and from judgment, and who shall declare him?
When was he put in prison? Like, when was he put in prison? Jeremiah was actually in prison. Isaiah tells us Ezekiel was also in prison, right? But the bigger thing is Israel was in exile. They were in prison. And here's what I want you to pay attention to. Like,
For he was
there's,
cut off. We saw that in Daniel 9. Remember, Messiah shall be cut.
you saw that in Daniel 9 as well. Yes, you did. And you don't understand it, just like you don't understand it here. Jeremiah, and again, you never go to this passage as your type and shadow. Look, Jeremiah was cut off from the land of the living. Does that mean Jeremiah died and 3 days later he rose again? He was cut off, just as you see in Daniel and in Isaiah 53, but you never talk about this.
He was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. It does not make sense if Israel is this suffering servant.
Because you misunderstand the context and try to make it about your pretext. The fact that Israel is stricken for their sin doesn't mean that strickenness covers up their sin. I mean, how hard is this to understand? Again, Isaiah 55, which is in context of the suffering servant, says what? Seek Yahweh while he may be found, call upon him while he was near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to Yahweh, and he will have compassion on him. To our Elohim, he will abundantly pardon. You see, it's not the suffering, the affliction that brings forgiveness. It's Yahweh when you turn from your sin. And you know, I hate to tell you this, Adam, and other Christians and Messianics, but if you read Luke and Acts, Jesus did not die for your sin according to those writings. He died as an example that Israel do this. They seek Yahweh, not Jesus. Look at even what it says, as Paul saying in Acts 26:20. So King Agrippa, I did not prove disobedient to the heavenly vision, but kept declaring both those to Damascus first and also to Jerusalem, throughout all the region of Judea, even to the Gentiles, that they should repent. Same idea here. Repent does not mean change your mind, as Christians say. It means you change your deeds and forsake your wicked thoughts. It doesn't mean you change what you believe. Turn to Elohim, practicing deeds appropriate to repentance. This is a verse that you just hate. You mean I have to practice righteous deeds worthy of repentance? That's in the New Testament. And this is one of those passages that is absolutely consistent. Because it doesn't say turn to Jesus. It says turn to God. And I've also proved in this video, the New Testament does not say he is God. None of it. Let's look at another one, Revelation 3:2. Wake up and strengthen the things that remain which are about to die, for I have found your deeds complete in the sight of my God. If he is Yahweh, like Adam teaches and others teach, who is his God? Like, you just ignore passages you want and take passages out of context to support your pretext. And this is a perfect example as well, because they ignore key texts here in verse 10. In verse 10, absolutely, when I read this, it destroyed this stronghold. Absolutely, like taking an axe to it at the root and chopped it down. Yahweh was pleased to crush him. And I already showed like how it's the city of Jerusalem, how it's Ezekiel, and how it's Isaiah, putting him to grief. If you would place his soul as a guilt offering, his soul is his emotions, not his body. He will see his seed, and he will prolong his days. See these two passages? Do you see them? He will see his children. Meaning what? That though the grave was prepared for him, he did not enter it. His days will be prolonged on earth to see his children. He will not be cut off from the land of the living. This will not happen. Like, do you see it? The power of this passage to just destroy this idolatrous interpretation and destroy the Talmudic interpretation, because it's not about a single man in the future. It's not a messianic passage. Let's go to Isaiah 54, because this is crucial to read the context. Shout for joy, O barren woman, who has not given birth. Break forth into joyful shouting and cry aloud, you who have not been in labor, for more numerous are the sons of the desolate one than the sons of the married one, says Yahweh. Enlarge the place of your tent, stretch out the curtains of your dwellings, do not hold back. Lengthen your rod cords and strengthen your pegs. For you will spread abroad the right to the left, and your seed, see, we just talked about that, that's why it's connected. Your seed will possess the nations and will resettle the desolate cities. When were the cities made desolate and waste places? Do not be afraid, for you will not be put to shame. Do not feel dishonored, for you will not be humiliated. But you will forget the shame of your virginity, and the reproach of your widowhood will be remembered no more. For your husband is your maker. This is about the afflicted servant. So do you believe Yeshua is the bride of Yehovah, the maker? Because this is the context. Whose name is Yehovah of hosts, and your Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel, who is called the God of the earth. For Yehovah has called you like a wife forsaken and grieved in spirit. Remember what it said in verse 10 there. To crush him, putting him to grief. Israel, this is another Hebraic idiom that, if you don't understand, you're going to come to false interpretations. Israel is about the nation and individuals. It's called he, right? As we saw in the prior chapter. But Israel is also referred to as the Isha of Yahweh, the woman, the wife, whose name is Yahweh of hosts, and your Redeemer is the Holy One of Israel, who is called the Elohim of all the earth. And sorry, I already read that. Like a wife forsaken and grieved in spirit, even like one's wife, even like a wife of one's youth when she is rejected, says your Elohim. For a brief moment I forsook you, but with great compassion I will gather you, because they've been forsaken from the land. He's going to gather you back. In a flood of fury, I hid my face from you for a moment, but with everlasting loving kindness, I will have compassion on you, says Yahweh, your Redeemer. For this is like the days of Noah to me. And this is so interesting, this New Testament version, the days of Noah. See, in verse 37 of Matthew 24, for just as the days of Noah, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. For in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the days of Noah entered the ark. Shalom, my brother. And they did not understand until the flood came and took them away. So will this coming of the Son of Man be. See, this whole concept in the New Testament is that comparing the days of Noah is to the days of destruction. But Isaiah uses the days of Noah when I swore that the waters of Noah would not overflow the earth again. So I have sworn I will not be furious with you, nor will I break you. One is about destruction and one is about mercy. Even though man's heart is continually wicked from his youth, in Genesis 9, behold, I established my covenant with you and with your seed after you. And I have a whole video about this, like the rabbinic paradise I made last September. That the Noahide covenant is unconditional and to all people. It's universal. It's not based on your obedience. And this is why Isaiah goes to the days of Noah to show the mercy of Yah about his suffering servant. that he will not destroy the servant. I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, of all the things that come out of the ark, even every beast of the earth. Indeed, I establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by water of the flood, and there shall never again be a flood to destroy the earth. I mean, do you think this means that it's okay for a flood of fire to come to destroy the earth? I don't. This is the sign of my covenant, which I am giving to me between me and you, every living creature that is with you, on all successive generations. I will put my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of a covenant between me and the earth. And it will be when I bring a cloud over the earth that I will put a bow, and it will be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you, and every living creature of all flesh. And never again shall water become a flood to destroy all flesh. And what they say is, well, the fire is coming to destroy all flesh. Okay, but that would still be breaking the covenant. So the bow it shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all the flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant which I established between me and all flesh that is on earth. Which is exactly what we see in Isaiah 54. Though Israel was forsaken and afflicted for their sin, that affliction would not lead to Israel's death. That's why they will see their seed. In a flood of fury, verse 10, for the mountains may be removed and the hills may be shaken, but my loving kindness will not be removed from you, and my covenant of peace will not be shaken, says Jehovah, who has compassion on you. O afflicted one, storm-tossed and not comforted. See this word, the afflicted one? Adam and other Christians and Messianics, they love to say Isaiah 53 is a forbidden chapter. The Jews don't read it. Okay? Isaiah 54 is a forbidden chapter. Christians and Messianics don't read it. You see how easy that is to do? Because if you read it in context, how could you still believe what you believe about Isaiah 53? I will lay your stones in antimony, your foundations I will set in sapphires. And see what I said earlier about Jerusalem? This is clearly about the city now. That the city of Zion, of Jerusalem, will be restored. Moreover, I will make your battlements of rubies and your gates of crystal and your entire wall of precious stones. The city that was pierced for the transgression of the people will be restored. See, they blend it all together. This is Hebraic idioms that I don't even think the Talmudists really understand. Because, none of them have said this about this interpretation. Moreover, I will make your battlements of rubies and the gates of crystal and all your entire wall of precious stones. All your sons will be taught of Yehovah, and the peace of your sons will be great. This is the context of Isaiah 53. When did this happen in the first century? For the last 2,000 years, the Roman Church has used the teachings of this afflicted servant on the Roman cross to lead people away from the Torah and from Yehovah. This is the foundation Adam and other Messianics are built on. In righteousness you will be established. You will be far from oppression, for you will not fear, and from terror, for it will come near you. If anyone fiercely attacks you, it will not be from me. Whoever attacks you will fail because of you. You still believe Isaiah 53 is about the first century. Behold, I myself have created the craftsman who blows the fire of coals and brings out a weapon for its work. And I have created the bringer of ruin to wreak destruction. and no weapon that is formed against you will succeed. No weapon that is formed against you will succeed. Every tongue that accuses you in judgment you will condemn. And this is the inheritance of the slaves of Yahweh, and their righteousness is from me, declares Yahweh. Amen. That's such a beautiful passage. And, Christians don't read it. They don't read it in context. Now, the next passage he goes to, and I want to talk about this real quick before we close off for the night, evening, morning, whatever time it is. Yes, exactly, brother. He doesn't want anyone to perish. Listen to me, O coastlands, and pay attention, you peoples from afar. Yahweh called me from the womb. From the body of my mother, he made me. My name to be remembered. And so what do? Is they go to these two verses in this context to support that the servant is not always Israel, right? So who was the one called from the womb? And this is so quick to just show you. Jeremiah again, chapter 1, verse 6. Maybe a little before that. Yeah, verse 5. And now the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, it's the word of Yahweh coming to him. Yeah, this is the word. This is the word right here. It's not talking about a man. Before I formed you in the innermost parts, I knew you. And before you came out from the womb, I set you apart. Yahweh called me from the womb. Who's it talking about? Who's speaking here? It's Isaiah. It's Isaiah. I mean, you look at, he has set my mouth like a sharp sword. Why would you think it's anyone but Isaiah? And this is the same thing with Isaiah 61. And this is why you believe it's your idol. Because in Luke, in chapter 4, when he's in the synagogue, he quotes this and says, this is about me. Aha. You're so vain, you probably think this scripture is about you. The Spirit of the Lord Yahweh is upon me. So again, why would you think it's anyone else but Isaiah? Upon me can only mean Isaiah, who was writing this and speaking it. Because Yahweh has anointed me to bring good news to the afflicted. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim release to captives and freedom to prisoners, to proclaim the favorable year of Yahweh and the day of vengeance of our Elohim, to comfort all who mourn. And then it cuts this off, right? You never read the context. To grant those who mourn in Zion, giving them a headdress instead of ashes, the oil of rejoicing instead of mourning, the mantle of praise instead of a spirit of fainting. So they will be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of Yahweh, that he may show forth his beautiful glory. Then they will rebuild the ancient waste places. I mean, if you read it, it's pretty clear who Isaiah is talking about and what time frame he's talking about. When the ancient waste places of Jerusalem were going to be what? Rebuilt. I mean, you can just do a search on that, waste places. Ezra 9, to restore its waste places and to give us a wall in Judah and Jerusalem. And this is something he even mentions, he was reading in Nehemiah, that the waste places are being rebuilt to fulfill the prophecies. Isaiah 44:26, confirming the word of his servant and the counsel of his messengers, he will complete, and being the one who says of Jerusalem, she shall be inhabited, and the cities of Judah, they shall be built, and I will raise up her waste places again. And I already read this yesterday when I was talking about the pre-text you must have is the context before Isaiah 53. Indeed, Jehovah will comfort Zion. He will comfort her waste places. Isaiah 52:9. Break forth and shout joyfully, you waste places of Jerusalem. 58:12. Those from among you will rebuild the ancient waste places. Ezekiel 13. You prophets have been like foxes among the waste places. And over and over again, but you want it to be about some other time. And most of these minor prophets are also about the same time. Look at Amos. The sanctuaries of Israel laid waste. So let's go to another one. Micah chapter 1. The word of Yahweh which came to Micah of Moresheth in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he beheld concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. Hear, O people, all of you, give heed to earth as well of its fullness, and let the Lord Yahweh be a witness against you, the Lord from his holy temple. For behold, Yahweh is going forth from his place. He will come down and tread on the high places of earth. The mountains will melt under him, and the valleys will split, and they'll like wax before fire, and like water poured down a steep place. All this is for the transgression of Jacob, for the sins of the house of Israel. And what is the transgression of Jacob? Is it not Samaria, which is the high place of Judah? Is it not Jerusalem? So I will make Samaria a heap of ruins in the field, planting places for a vineyard, and I will pour her stones down into the valley, and her lay bare her foundations, and all of her graven images will be smashed, and all of her earnings will be burned with fire, and all of her idols I will make desolate, for she collected them from a harlot's earnings, and to the earnings of a harlot they will return. Because of this I must lament and wail. I must go for barefoot and naked. I must make a lament like the jackals, and the mourning like the ostriches. For her wound is incurable. For it has come to Judah. It has even reached the gate of my people, even to Jerusalem. Yahweh laid waste to Samaria and to Jerusalem because of their idolatry. These are not about future people. But as I've said many times, especially when Christians get upset when I use passages to reveal the idol, it's like, so you're trying to make that about me? No, I'm not. It's an example of what you're doing, because mankind has this tendency to get in loops. We just repeat the same sins over and over again. It's not about you, but it is a type of what you are doing. Making a man into your God. Worshipping with human sacrifice and theophagy. And now, I pray that Adam repents, because he has put himself as a head when he should not be a head. All glory to Yahweh.